morning, church. Let's stand together. Let's put our hands together and raise our voices in worship this morning. We're reaching out to welcome you, God. Fill this place again with your song. And flood our thoughts with wonder and awe. And give us a greater glimpse of a never-changing God. All we want and all we need is found in you, is found in you, Jesus. Every victory is found in you, it's found in you. Open wide our hearts now to yours. Every fear bow down to your love, that we would see like never before. Give us a greater glimpse of an ever-changing God. All we want and all we need is found in you, it's found in you, Jesus. Every victory is found in you, it's found in you. In your presence there is freedom. In your presence we are made whole. In your presence there is freedom. In your presence we are made whole. All we want and all we need is found in you, it's found in you, Jesus. Every victory is found in you, it's found in you. All we want and all we need is found in you, it's found in you, Jesus. Every victory is found in you, it's found in
Thousand times I've failed, still your mercy remains. Should I stumble again, I'm caught in your grace everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. My heart and my soul, Lord, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. my heart and my soul. Lord, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out. My heart and my soul, Lord, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out.
Well, it has been a hot minute since I've had a minute to speak in between songs. There's so much I'd like to share with you, but Pastor Jeff also has something prepared, so we'll give him his time also. But as we were putting these songs together, it was kind of a backwards glimpse. I chose my 2 songs I'm singing, and Doug chose his song. And as I was practicing this week, I've just kind of been struggling with some things just popping up that I kind of had thought I had managed. Self-doubt, self-confidence, and those are the things that the devil just kind of attacks me with. Like, you're not good enough to stand there, you're not good enough to be in this position. And so I'm singing these songs, and this sounds like it's really cheesy when you put them all together, but what I need to combat those attacks from the devil is found in Jesus. The very beginning, very first song. And when I let him work inside of me, all of that gets pushed out, and my light shines for him even brighter. And then as we wrap up this morning singing together, all we need is found in Jesus. He's everything that we need. So let's sing this last song together. Father, we thank you so much that when we make a decision to follow you, there's no turning back, that you give us everything that we need, Lord. And I just ask as we go forward into this week that you'll keep that in the forefront of our mind. I ask that you open our hearts and our minds to hear your word this morning, and that we'll go out into your world a bright, shining light for you. We love you, Jesus. In your precious and holy name, amen. You may be seated.
Good morning and welcome to Bridgepoint Church. We are so excited that you've joined us today. There is a great service in store for you. But before we get to the part 2 of our sermon series, I want to get you caught up on what's going down at Bridgepoint. Summers at Bridgepoint are all about camps. We have student camp coming up on July 24th, and it's going through July 28th. This is for middle school and high school students, and it will be an unforgettable time and a great opportunity for students to take next steps in their faith. If you're a parent or guardian of a kid in that age group and you got that week free, your kids definitely want to participate in this, so get them signed up through the Church Center app. Speaking of camps, we always need partnerships financially to make camps happen. We have 2 ways that you can give. You can use the red envelopes in the lobby. There's numbers written on those, and you can just give the corresponding amount of money to the number that you take. Or if you're thinking, I just want to sponsor a random amount of money or a full scholarship or a half scholarship, you can do that through the giving app at bridgepointchurch.com, or you can use the Church Center app to give the same way, or you can even drop a check in the black boxes at the exits. No matter how you give, we're thrilled that you're partnering with us so that you can give summer camp to a student. Who's got 2 thumbs and won't be going to the women's retreat? Me. But you definitely should if you are one of the ladies at Bridgepoint. On September 8th through the 10th, the ladies are heading up to Donley and are going to have an incredible time. The trick is, registration closes at the end of July, so you can't put this off. You got to be proactive and get it done. Fellas, great way to get your lady a time away as well. So make it a priority, get signed up, save the date. You can do it through the Church Center app. It's going to be an awesome time. If you're a guest with us at Bridgepoint, I want to say a huge thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great experience. We would love to partner with you in a really unique way. If you'll text the word guest to the number 208-826-4433 and fill out all of the prompts, we are going to donate 5 meals to the Boise Rescue Mission in your honor. It's just our way to partner with you real quick to change your world. It's an awesome opportunity. I hope you'll take advantage of that, and we are so glad you've joined us. Well, that's all from me, which means it is halftime. This is your opportunity to grab your phone, check that notification, send that text, use the restroom, drink coffee, do whatever you want to do. Adopt a puppy if you can get it accomplished. But it is halftime starting now.
Wow, good morning. It's really great to see everybody here and appreciate it. For those of you that are joining us online, thanks for doing that as well. And for all of us, let's take our Bible, look to Genesis chapter number 12. While you're turning there, let me just give you some good news. And the good news is that in our children's ministry, things are just exploding, which is awesome. No, not in a literal sense. Let's make sure that we got that clear, all right? Just kids everywhere. In fact, we are at our pre-COVID attendance in children's ministry, which is awesome. Woo! Yeah, I'll take that. Which means that last Sunday there were 12 3-year-olds and 15 preschoolers, which is just the best ever. And in fact, here's a picture. And yeah, come on, just awesome. But what it also means is great opportunities to serve. And so we are in need of some help during the summer. And if you would like to volunteer, if you're looking for a place to serve, then you can contact Misty. And Misty's email address is misty@bridgepointchurch.com. Or you could walk over there after church service. And she wanted to be here right now, but she's swamped, all right? So she's over there taking care of kids. But if you could help out or at least like some additional information, then please feel free to go over there and have that conversation with Misty. Now, last week we started out a brand new series on the life of Abraham, or Abram, which is the same person. And so what we found out is that God tells Abram to move. And in the process of God telling Abram to move, he makes some promises to Abram. In fact, they're not even, well, they're promises, but they're a covenant, which is a promise on steroids. And so God is making this covenant with Abram, and what we found out last week is that God makes a personal covenant with Abram and tells him that he's going to make Abram's name great. And he's going to make his descendants as the stars of the sky and the sand of the seashore. Which also brings us to the second part, and that is that God makes a covenant with Abraham that has a national consequence to it, that these descendants of Abram are going to become a great nation. And they become the nation of Israel, which is still obviously here today. And then there is a universal part of this promise, and that is that the people who bless Abram's descendants are going to be blessed, and the people who curse Abram's descendants are going to be cursed. And this is such an important thing that it has its own name, and it's called the Abrahamic Covenant. And so it's still going on to this very moment. So here we have Abram, and he leaves his hometown. In fact, here's a map just as to remind us that he starts out in the Ur of the Chaldeans and then goes up northwest to Haran, which is in modern-day Turkey. He didn't obey completely what God had told him to do. In fact, he gets stuck there in Haran for about 15 years. And then he does go ahead and travel down to Canaan, which is in the area of modern-day Israel next to Jerusalem. Now, Abram is 75 years old. God has blessed him in these travels. God has appeared to him and confirmed with him again what he had told him previously. And what we find out is that Abraham, well, he builds an altar, a couple of altars to the Lord, and he worships the Lord. And I got to tell you, man, things are good until they're not, right? You know those good moments of life? How many of you, you've experienced some good moments in life? It was a sweet 10 minutes, right? Well, here's what happens. You're there in Genesis chapter 12. Let's look in verse number 10, and it says this: Now there was a famine in the land, And Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. You know, life happens. Things happen. In the life of Job, it's put this way: now there was a day, and that day, there was all sorts of things that happened in Job's life. In Abram's life, now there was a famine in the land. And one of the things that we've talked about is that out of the life of Abram, what are the lessons that we can learn, 4,000 years later, 6,000 miles away from where all of this happened? One of the things that just right off the bat that we all need to learn is this, that every follower of Jesus will face tests of faith. Every single one of us. These tests of faith you will have no control over. You don't get to schedule them. They won't be on Outlook. Tuesday, 9 o'clock, test of faith. Not the way it works at all. These are things that happen in our life. In fact, a test can be allowed by God or directed by God. Now, here's a difference. If a test is allowed by God, that might be something that is just a circumstance that happens to be part of a normal day. Maybe, like if you go to school, then maybe you have an opportunity to cheat, right? Now, God didn't bring that opportunity for you to cheat, but it's there, and it becomes a test. Maybe it's something at work, and maybe it's a test of your honesty, a test of your integrity. And it's not necessarily brought by God, but it's used by God to test your integrity. Now, something that is directed by God is very intentional. This is a circumstance, a situation, maybe a person that comes into your life that absolutely is there because God has decided that this is the time, this is the place, and it may be with this person that you're going to intersect what you say about your faith and what you actually do when it comes to your faith. These tests are allowed. Now, the purpose of the test is not for God to go, I wasn't sure what he was going to do, but he made it, right? God knows that. So the purpose is not for God's knowledge, the purpose is for our knowledge. Look, a teacher doesn't give the student a test because the teacher lacks the information. The teacher knows it. It's for the student to know what's going on and have they mastered the subject. So, this is for our knowledge. Now, a test, thinking about this, just big picture, what's going on in Abram's life that applies to our life. A test often takes us outside of our knowledge and experience. A test is meant to stretch us. A test is meant to take us outside of our comfort zone. Now, here's what I mean in this particular test. What we find in verse number 10 is that there was a famine in the land. And it's described as a great famine. It was severe in all of the land. So if you think about how Abram had grown up, when he was growing up in the Ur of the Chaldeans, that's in modern-day Iraq, and if you were to look at that map again, what you would find is that it is right there on the bank of the river Euphrates, which that is a major, major river in the Middle East. Okay, so that's what the agriculture was based on. It was based on the water from the river. Okay, now that's important. He moves up to Haran, spends 15 years there, modern-day Turkey. That is on the bank of the river Belias. And so their agriculture based on the water from the river. Now, river water, as we know here in Idaho, kind of depends on snow in the mountains, all that kind of stuff, but usually the water is flowing. Now, what's the difference? Now he's in Canaan, he's in Israel. And although, of course, there are some rivers in Israel, but agriculture is not based on the water from a river. It's based on 2 rainy seasons. And if those rainy seasons don't happen, if there's not enough rain, then the crops fail and there is famine in the land. Now, this may not seem like it's that big a deal, but it is. And here's why. Abraham is in a situation where he's got his family, he's got his servants, he's got all of his livestock. They are there and they don't have any food. What is he going to do? Back in the day, they didn't face that kind of thing because there was water in the river. There was always going to be some kind of agriculture. Now they are in a severe famine. So in this test, what Abram decides to do is that he decides to go to a place that he's familiar with in the sense that it's got a river and the agriculture is based on the water from a river. Now, to his credit, he doesn't go back to the Ur of the Chaldees. He doesn't backtrack to Haran, modern Turkey, or back to Iraq. But he does know of a place that's got a lot of food, agriculture that's based on a river, and what he decides to do is he decides to go to Egypt. Because there just happens to be a major river in Egypt that supports all sorts of agriculture, and there is food there in Egypt. So, a test requires a response. It requires a response. Now, in the middle of all this, there's no question that there's a famine. It's severe. It's a bad deal. He needs to do something. And here's his response: to go to Egypt. Now, remember what God has already said to him. What God has already said to him is that this land of Canaan, I'm giving this to you. You're going to be able to have that land, and then I'm going to make you a mighty nation here. Now, the problem was not going to Egypt. That was not necessarily the problem. You might be able to think back, if you are thinking through, your Bible trivia knowledge. Was there ever a time when God directed people to go to Egypt because there was a problem or a circumstance or a famine that they had needed to deal with? You can remember this because it's just not that many years later in the history of Abraham's descendants that Joseph goes to Egypt, sold into slavery. And then the whole nation, all of the Israelites, all of his descendants, they move to Egypt and they spend about 400 years there. Egypt's not necessarily the problem. In fact, in the New Testament, it was Joseph, Jesus' stepfather, and Mary, where they left Israel, Nazareth, and went to Bethlehem, went to Egypt because, their life was in danger. So the issue is not, the fact that they went to Egypt. The issue is, how did Abraham arrive at this decision? When you read through the rest of chapter number 12, you're not going to find that there's any prayer from Abram. There's any seeking of God's direction. There's just an issue, and Abram's got a solution, and so he acts on it. And if you just think about this a little bit, there's just a little bit of a feel from this. That Abram says, I've got to take this into my own hands. I'm not quite sure that I can trust God when it comes to this. And as a result of Abram making this decision, without consulting God, just going, what a mess. Now we'll stop here for just a second. I think we all share something in common. And what we share in common with Abram is not moving to Egypt. I don't know that any of us have done that. But here's what we share in common. Taking things into our own hands, moving way too quickly, deciding that, you know what, I'm not sure what God's going to do, and I'm not sure I can even trust him on this, but I've got to do something, so I'm going to do it. And then come to find out, a little bit later on, it is a huge mess that I have made. Anybody like that here at all with me? I know I'm not the only one, all right? We're all in this together. And so that's what happens. Now, what happens? Look at verse number 11. It says, and it came to pass when he was close to entering Egypt. He's just about ready to cross the border, and he says to Sarai, his wife, indeed, I know you are a woman of beautiful countenance. You know, that's where he should have stopped. Just should have stopped right there. It'd all been good, no problems, right? But that's not what happens. Now, here's something that's interesting about Sarai. Now, look, Sarai, there's about 15 different ways to pronounce this name. Her name is going to be changed to Sarah in chapter number 17, but these people, whether I pronounce it Sarai, Sarah, they're all the same people. Now, she is about 10 years younger than Abraham, which makes her roughly 65 years old, because Abraham's 75. And we find out later in Genesis that she passes away at 127. So people are living a little bit longer. She's right at the halfway point here. And there is no question that she is a beautiful woman. Now, verse number 12. Therefore, as a result of you being so beautiful, we've got something we got to deal with. And here's what he thinks he needs to deal with. Therefore, it will happen. Now, you're not quite sure if that's exactly what's going to happen, but he's convinced himself that this is exactly what will happen. What will happen? It will happen when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Okay, here's the problem. The problem is that, yes, Sarah is beautiful. And as soon as they get into Egypt, people in power in Egypt are going to acknowledge that she is beautiful. In fact, she is so beautiful that somebody in power is going to say, yeah, I want you to be my wife. But because you're married to this guy, the only way that you can be my wife is for us to get rid of this guy. And so here's, in his mind, what's going to happen. They'll see how beautiful Sarah is. They'll want her to be their wife, somebody's wife, and so they're going to kill him. So here's the plan. As he's thought through all of that, here is his plan. Verse 13. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake. Let me just stop right here. That plan is not going to be well with anybody on the way that's playing out, right? That it may be well for your sake, that I may live because of you. So here's the solution. The story that we'll tell is this. You're not my wife, you're my sister. And you know what? Because you are my sister and I'm your older brother and you don't have a husband, if a woman didn't have a husband back in the day, then the older brother was responsible for her arranged marriage. So if he's the older brother and now somebody comes up and says, hey, you know what? I want Sarah to be my wife. He, as the older brother, not the husband, the older brother is the one that's going to do negotiation for the dowry and all that kind of thing and make the arranged marriage. And he can figure out in his mind that what he can do is in the process of this, we'll just kind of delay, we'll stall, we'll see if get this famine over with. And before Sarah is actually taken to be somebody's wife, they'll be able to sneak out and get out before this happens. Now, that's a plan. But that's a plan that is just crazy, right? Now, but here's something that I think we can take from this. Everybody, not just Abram, everybody has a go-to response when pressure hits. Everybody does. When you're under stress, there is something that automatically comes to you. It's your response. It's your go-to response. It's just what happens. You are the jelly donut that as soon as somebody puts their thumb in the middle of you, whatever's on the inside is going to come out on the outside. So, what's your go-to? Is your go-to when you're under a lot of stress, under a lot of pressure? Is your go-to anger? You just get mad. Things are hard at work, things are hard in your home, but you're under a lot of stress. Maybe it's financial stress, whatever it may be, but what comes out of you is that you are angry. Or is your go-to maybe the opposite of anger? Maybe your go-to is withdrawal. You'll isolate. You'll be quiet. You'll clam up. You'll stay away from people. You'll just move backwards, and the walls go up, and you're not willing to have any conversation with people. What's wrong? Nothing. And that's your go-to. Or maybe your go-to is fear. When pressure happens, you are the worst-case scenario person. I mean, wow, something happens at work, something happens with the kids, something happens wherever it may be. It's the worst-case scenario, and that is your go-to. Everybody has a go-to. It comes from our background. It comes from maybe how we were raised, maybe what you saw modeled by your mom and dad. Wherever it is, every person has a go-to response when the pressure hits. And Abram, you know, this man of faith, this guy that is in the Hall of Fame, you know, in Hebrews chapter number 11, the father of our faith, the friend of God, all of that, Abram's go-to response was to lie. He lies. This is not the first time, and it is not the last time that Abraham, under pressure, he will just flat out lie. Figures that's the best way to get out of this, you know? Anytime you lie, it just makes things better. That's his go-to. And look, even this lie that he's telling here in Genesis chapter number 12, you move forward a couple chapters, he tells the very same lie again. It's his go-to. It's what he does. And not only does he do it, but if you're not careful, whatever your go-to is, you will pass it down to your kids. That's probably where you got your go-to. And your kids, they're watching your go-to. You think about his kids, Abraham's go-to response was to lie. What about his son, Isaac? Any problems with lying in the life of Isaac? Yeah. How about not only Isaac, but how about his grandson, Jacob? Oh, man. It just goes on and on and on. Look, the New Testament describes it this way. Hebrews chapter 12, verse number 1. It says, therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, we are being watched from heaven. There is a cloud of witnesses that are watching what we're doing. It says, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. This middle section of this verse, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, or so easily trips us up. Another version says, so easily besets us. There is some sin in your life and in my life. It's not every sin, but there is one. There is one that so easily we fall for. It becomes our go-to. The sin of lying is what happens in Abraham. It ensnares him, and boy, does it ever. And whatever this sin is, whatever our go-to is, it is a weight. It's a 100-pound backpack. You can operate a little bit, but you won't operate very long. So, this is what Abraham does. Now, okay, look, go back to Genesis chapter 12. Now, what's the story? The story is this. Hey, here's what we'll do. They're going to see how beautiful you are, and they're going to want you to be someone's wife. And here's what we'll tell them. I'm your brother, not your husband. And then that'll buy us some time, and we'll be able to figure out what we can do and get out of here. Great story, right? Don't you think, we've heard some wild stories. This is a wild one. Don't you think Abraham could come up with something better than that? Here's a detail that we may not be aware of. Look to Genesis chapter number 20, verse number 12. Here we go. And Abraham's talking here, and she really is my sister, for we both have the same father, this guy named Terah, but different mothers, and I married her. Half brother, half sister, same dad, different moms. Is she his sister? Sorta. Half sister? Technically. Now, can we just all say yuck together? Ooh. Okay, well, that's a whole different issue. But here's the issue when we're talking about the issue of lying. The issue is this: a half-truth is a whole lie. When we're trying to scheme, when we're rationalizing, justifying things, look, it doesn't really change things. When we hide things, when we keep back the truth, it doesn't make it any better. Do you think that Sarah felt good about, okay, we're telling some of the truth, but not all the truth, but they don't know our family background. You're just flat telling them, we're brother, sister, not husband, wife. Oh, awful. Let's take a quick time out here. Let's think about this for a second. Here's a question. Should Sarah have gone along with Abram's lie? Should she have gone along with it? Well, here's something that I think it's important for all of us to know. That whenever somebody is in authority over us, and by the way, every single person has someone or multiple people who are in authority over us. And by the way, if you happen to be a person in authority, your responsibility, according to Jesus, is for you to submit to the authority that is over you so you can be the proper authority for those that you are in authority over. Everybody has someone that they are to submit to be in authority under. But for people that has someone who's in authority over them, maybe it's a husband, maybe it's a boss, it could be all sorts of different people. But if somebody is asking you to do something that is illegal or immoral, our ultimate authority is not a human authority. Our ultimate authority is God. And first and foremost, we submit to God and His authority, and then we submit to the human authority that God has placed over us. But if somebody's asking you to do something that's illegal, somebody's asking you to do something that is immoral, you do not have an obligation to submit yourself to what they are asking you to do. Should Sarah have gone along with Abram's lie? Here's the answer. No. No. Somebody after the first service came up and said, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure that women were in a position to be able to say no and those kind of things. And, okay, things were a little bit different back then. But I promise you that in a husband-wife relationship, she had input. And in fact, you go all the way back to Genesis, and what we find is that the husband and wife team, a two-piece jigsaw puzzle that makes a perfect picture, that picture then, and the responsibility that a wife has is to come alongside and encourage her husband to do what is right and help him keep from doing what is wrong. We have that responsibility. What would have happened if that were her answer? Abraham comes up to Sarah and goes, hey, I got a plan. Here's what we're going to do. And she looks at him and she goes, no. What would have happened? Well, I don't know exactly what would have happened. But here's what I do know. That God is more than capable of working this out without Abraham's crazy plan. So, look at verse number 14. Verse number 14. And so it was, when Abram came into Egypt, that the Egyptians saw the woman, and she was very beautiful. So everybody's in agreement here in regards to Sarah. Verse 15. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. Whoa, wait a minute. In all the scheming, all the planning, Abram never saw this coming. His thought was, hey, just the people that they're going to come in contact with, I think we can bluff our way through this, we can buy a little bit of time, those kind of things, but not when it comes to the most powerful man in Egypt and perhaps the world at that time. Now, people who knew Pharaoh told Pharaoh about how beautiful Sarah was, and Pharaoh said, all right, I'm going to add her to my harem. Now, here's something we can learn. We know this. We know this. A lie can never be controlled. You can never control it. You think that you've got this well thought out, crafty scheme. Man, I'm going to tell this lie. This is a thing of beauty. This is one of my best. I am sure this is going to work. But things never work like we think they will. I mean, look, when you lie, you can't control it. And one of the reasons why you can't control it is because you lie. And then you have to tell another lie to cover your lie. And then, how many of you have kids? We know this. We know this. And then you have to lie to cover that lie. Now, I know you've been waiting for this moment in the sermon. Here is a quote from Judge Judy. If you tell the truth, then you don't have to worry about have a good memory. You don't have to remember, what was that lie that I told this person 3 lies out from the original lie? This is why when people are under, investigation, they're often interviewed multiple times. Why are they interviewed multiple times? There are people who are just trying to find out if there's a difference in the story. Because if you lie, you'll never keep the story straight. And then, Look, this is a nightmare for both of them. What has happened? She is now waiting there in Pharaoh's house. What is she waiting for? There is a time period that has to go by before a woman can be added to the harem. She's in that waiting period. She's in Pharaoh's house. Abram is not going to be able to go up to the door of Pharaoh's house, knock on it and go, hey, I'd like to have Sarah back. I'd like to tell you what the truth is now. I mean, that's not what is happening. So here we have Sarah, who's waiting to become part of Pharaoh's harem. No way she wanted to do that. That's awful. And now you've got Abram, whose wife is in Pharaoh's house, and this well-crafted lie that he has spun has fallen apart, and it is a huge mess. Here's something that we all have to painfully learn. God does not need us to lie for him. We don't have to lie for him. I mean, are they better off now as a result of a lie? Are they better off? No. Would they have been better off just to stay in Canaan and figure out what they were going to do when it comes to the famine that was in the land? I'll tell you, way better to deal with a famine with your family intact and your wife not in somebody's house waiting to become part of a harem than it is to be in Egypt where there's plenty of food and your wife is locked up behind the castle. So, wow, what happens next? Here's what happens. God's faithfulness is greater than our failures. God's faithfulness is greater than our failures. Look at verse number 17. I love these first three words. It says, but the Lord. In a hopeless, helpless situation where Abraham, he's got no more schemes. He can't figure out what to do. It looks like he's lost Sarah forever. She's going to be part of Pharaoh's harem, and who knows what's going to happen. He's just in this deep pit of despair, but the Lord, and what does the Lord do? But the Lord plagued Pharaoh. Remember what God told Abram in the first part of chapter number 12. I'm going to bless those who bless you, and I'm going to what? Curse those who curse you. And this is playing out. He plagues Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. What God does is what only God can do. With all the money that Abram has, with everything else that he has, Abraham cannot come up with a plague, a great plague, and a plague that is targeted just, not for everybody, not the entire land of Egypt, just for Pharaoh and his house. So, look at verse number 18. And Pharaoh called Abram. Send a message, get this guy in here, and here's what he says. He says, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Now, I don't know exactly how he figured out 2 + 2, but he's now got the lie figured out. He knows that Sarah is his wife. Verse 19, why did you say she is my sister? In other words, you flat out lied to me. Now, it is not a good thing to lie to the most powerful man in all of Egypt. I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Here's what Pharaoh does. Pharaoh says, hey, you lied to me. I almost did something that I wouldn't have done if I'd had all the information. And look what your lie is now costing me. There's this plague going on. And what I want, he calls his soldiers. Get them everything, Abraham, Sarah, everybody, all their livestock, and evict them, get them out, take them to the border. Another way to put this is that if they were thrown out and said, stay out of the Woolworth store, don't come back, right? And so, this is what happens. They are evicted. My faithlessness cannot compromise God's faithfulness because he is so much greater. 2 Timothy 2:13 says this, if we are unfaithful. Maybe this should say, when we are unfaithful. There are going to be times when maybe it's that sin that so easily ensnares us. Maybe it's something that happens. Maybe it could be all sorts of things. But whatever it is, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny who he is. Now, God's promise, God's plan. Look, none of this is going to end because some idiot dreamed up some crazy lie. Now, before we roll our eyes and look and go, yeah, Abraham, what an idiot. It's probably not the idiot that I'm talking about right now. I think I'll just raise my hand. Because before I'm too harsh on Abraham, I have to look in a mirror and realize, what do I do when pressure comes, when stress comes? What is my go-to? Have I dreamed up crazy schemes? Have I come up with, these kind of lies? Have I imagined that somehow in this circumstance I need to be in control? God is going to keep his promise, not because of us. Oftentimes, God keeps his promise in spite of us. So here's what happens. God kept Abraham from getting all that he deserved. Look at verse number 16. Let's go backwards for just a second. He, speaking of Pharaoh, treated Abram well for her, Sarah's sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. Now look to verse 19. Why did you say, she's my sister, and might have taken her as my wife? Therefore, here's your wife, take her and go your way. You put those two verses together, and what you find out is this. Hey, I treated you well. Why did you treat me by lying to me? And what he could have done was exactly what Abraham feared. At this moment, verse number 20 could have said, and he took Abraham out and executed him. He could have done that. But he doesn't. Pharaoh knows that there's some tie. He may not understand it all, but there is some tie between how I am treating Abraham and Sarah, a blessing or a curse. And so he just says, you can go ahead and get out. Look, this rescue is not a reward for Abraham's righteousness. This rescue is an extension of God's grace. Now, does that mean there weren't consequences? Of course there's consequences. There's consequences that happen, some of which we'll read about, and some of which are not recorded, because I don't know how this reunion played out. When Sarah is released from Pharaoh's house, and now she's standing there by Abraham, and now the entire family and everybody is now being escorted out of Egypt, but my imagination can certainly lead me to believe that there was more than one conversation that happened between Sarah and Abraham. Don't you think? So there are some things that happened. Now, last thing. Verse number 1 of chapter 13. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Look, what if this is what he did at the beginning of all of this famine? What if this is what he did in terms of, God, what is it that you want me to do? It's interesting that God brings Abram back to the place where he started. He would have been way better off to stay in Canaan than to go down to Egypt. Now, lessons learned. God means what he says. Look at verse number 5. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now, this may seem to be insignificant, but this is such an important verse in regard to what is going to happen over the next several chapters. And the lesson that Abram learns in Egypt, there's going to be other opportunities to apply it in the situations that are to come. How do I apply Abram's lessons to my life? Here's the first one. Watch out for the blind side. In other words, you and I are going to be tested. 1 Peter chapter 4 says, don't be surprised concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing has happened to you. You will have tests. There will be trials. Be ready. Don't be blindsided. The second thing is this. Know that every time I lie, I make things worse. It'll never be better. I'll just make things worse. It's better to tell the truth and face the consequences of the truth than to multiply the problem by lying. And then the last one, identify and work on my go-to response to fear. My go-to response. Hey, what happens in a situation where there is stress? I mean, somebody's got their thumb right in the middle of you and they are pressing down hard. What would happen if your go-to response, instead of being angry, instead of being withdrawn, instead of being fearful, instead of being deceptive, what would happen if your go-to response in the middle of all that pressure was your go-to response was faith? Your go-to response was prayer. Your go-to response was loving someone. Your go-to response was trusting in God. You see, we can change our go-to response, but we're going to have to be intentional. We're going to have to be purposeful. We're going to have to decide that, fear, anger, lying, withdraw, none of that helps at all. What will help in the middle of stress, a trial, unforeseen circumstances, is that instead of turning away from God, we turn toward God. Let's pray together. God, we're thankful that you have given us your word, that we can learn lessons from and apply to our life, the principles that are in place and then the applications. And Lord, I pray for each person who's here today. I am sure there are people here that are here in the building and watching online that they are in the middle of a trial, a test. I pray, Lord, that you would give them the grace that they need, the knowledge that they need, provide direction in terms of decisions, give them the endurance and the patience, Lord, to be able to say yes to you and what you would have us to do. Lord, for the person that is just wrestling with some things, maybe it's because of the things in their own life, maybe it's for people that they know and love. I pray, Lord, that you would comfort their heart. I pray, Lord, that you would give that sufficient grace. We're thankful that you love us, thankful for all that you do, and we ask this in Christ's name. Amen. Well, let's do this. Let's end. We started out on a good note in regard to the number of children that are part of our children's ministry, and don't forget to contact Misty. And then second of all, we talked last week about our youth pastor position and Josh and Becky who are candidating for that position. And take a quick look at this video.
Hello, we are the McCammons. My name is Josh, this is my wife Becky, and our 2-year-old Addison. We are so excited to announce that we are going to be joining the Bridgepoint family as the new middle school and high school youth pastor. I've been talking with the
This is our cat Jones.
This is our cat Jones. He's gone. I've been talking with it is Jones, with the leadership at Bridgepoint for the past couple of weeks, and my wife and I got to attend a couple services. We left both services just amazed at the sense of community and how welcoming you guys were. Last weekend, we got to fly in and meet a lot of the students and a couple of the parents, and at the end of that trip, I accepted the position of youth pastor. We have just been so amazed at how God has been working and leading through all the different ups and downs of this whole process, and we are just super excited to start working with our students and to meet all the rest of you in a couple weeks. If you could just be praying for us as we transition, especially moving with a 2-year-old is going to be interesting. Just keep us in prayer for that. We'd be very grateful. Thank you so much and take care. Can you say bye? Can you say bye? Bye. Whisper bye.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So they will be here sometime mid-July. They have a home to sell there in Spokane, so that's a matter of prayer. But regardless of how it all plays out, they will be going to camp with our students in the 3rd week of July. So I wanted to let you know that. The last thing is, if you came to give an offering, thank you for your generosity, and you can do so in the boxes that are there in the back. Let's all stand. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us online, and God bless you. Have a great afternoon, a great week, and we will see you back next week. God bless.